Nathan Cole had been invisible for 3 years, and he liked it that way. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead on the third floor of Hayes Enterprises, casting their sterile glow across rows of cubicles where accountants and analysts typed away at spreadsheets they would email to executives who would never read them. He crawled under Jennifer Wu's desk for the third time that month, untangling Ethernet cables someone had kicked loose during a meeting. The familiar smell of carpet cleaner and stale coffee filled his nostrils as he worked. His toolkit spread out beside him like surgical instruments. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Sophie. "Don't forget science project supplies after school." He typed back a thumbs up with one hand while fishing a cable through the desk grommet with the other. 7:45 in the morning. He dropped her at Riverside Elementary at 7:30, watched her walk through the gates with her purple backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The same backpack Sarah had bought 2 months before the diagnosis. 4 years gone now, but some mornings Nathan still turned to tell her something before remembering the empty space beside him in bed. The cable clicked into place. Nathan backed out from under the desk, knees protesting the movement. 35 wasn't old, but 6 years in the Army crawling through server rooms in dusty forward operating bases had left their marks. He tested Jennifer's connection, waited for the green light, then packed his toolkit without a word. She didn't look up from her screen. He could have been a piece of furniture for all the acknowledgement he received. Tom Richards caught him at the elevator bank, coffee in hand, tie already loosened despite the early hour. "Man, you've been doing the same thing for 3 years. Don't you want more?" Nathan pressed the down button. His reflection in the polished steel doors showed a man who needed a haircut, needed to iron his shirt better, needed a lot of things he didn't have time to need. "I want stability. That's more." Tom shook his head, the gesture carrying the pity of someone who still believed in career trajectories in corner offices. "They offered you that supervisor position last year. You turned it down." The elevator arrived. Nathan stepped inside, finger hovering over the button for the basement IT department. "Sophie needed me home by 4. Supervisors work late." The doors closed on Tom's expression, cutting off whatever wisdom about ambition and sacrifice he'd been preparing to dispense. Nathan descended alone, the only sound the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys doing their job without complaint or aspiration. In the basement, he logged into the help desk system. 12 tickets already waiting. Printer jam in HR. Password reset for someone who tried their dog's name 6 times before calling. A monitor making a buzzing noise that would turn out to be the user's phone on vibrate. His phone rang, not a text this time, an actual call. Nathan glanced at the screen. Extension 4000, executive floor. In 3 years, he'd never gotten a call from the executive floor. "IE department, this is Nathan Cole." The voice on the other end belonged to someone whose time was worth more per minute than Nathan made in an hour. "Mr. Cole, we have an emergency situation. Ms. Hayes' office on the 40th floor. Computer malfunction during an investor conference. She specifically requested someone immediately." Nathan's hand tightened on the phone. The 40th floor, Victoria Hayes' territory. The woman whose face appeared on the company website under leadership, whose name went on the quarterly earnings reports, whose existence occupied a different reality than the one Nathan inhabited. "I can be there in 10 minutes. He grabbed his toolkit, locked his workstation, and headed for the elevator. Around him, the basement IT department continued its quiet work. Cables hung from ceiling panels like mechanical intestines. Server fans hummed their white noise symphony. Nobody looked up as he left. They wouldn't notice he was gone. The elevator climbed. 3rd floor, 10th floor, 25th floor. Nathan watched the numbers tick upward, each one carrying him further from his usual territory. The metal walls reflected a distorted version of himself, a man who'd learned to take up as little space as possible in rooms where his presence was required but not welcomed. He'd turned down that supervisor position because Sophie had nightmares 3 times a week back then, waking up crying about monsters that looked like the cancer that had eaten her mother from the inside out. Being home by 4 meant being there when she got off the bus, meant seeing her face light up because Daddy was home, meant she could make it through one more day without everything falling apart. The elevator dinged, 40th floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. Marble floors stretched toward floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline like a painting worth more than Nathan's annual salary. Abstract sculptures occupied corners, their twisted metal forms suggesting either profound artistic vision or expensive jokes on people who cared about such things. The reception desk was dark wood polished to a mirror shine, and behind it sat a woman whose pearls probably cost more than his car. Nathan Cole, IT. She glanced at his badge, already prepared for his arrival, already categorizing him as someone who fixed things and then left. Third door on the left. Ms. Hayes is waiting. She has meetings starting in 45 minutes. Nathan walked down the hallway, his footsteps muffled by carpet so thick he could feel it through his work boots. Through the windows on his right, the city spread out in miniature. Cars moved like blood cells through arterial streets. Buildings clustered together in patterns that made sense from up here. All the chaos and noise compressed into something almost peaceful. He found the third door. It stood open. Victoria Hayes had her back to him, phone pressed to her ear, posture radiating the kind of tension that came from holding 1,000 things together through sheer force of will. I don't care what the projections say. If the Tokyo office can't deliver the numbers they promised, we restructure. I'm not interested in excuses. Her voice carried the controlled edge of someone who'd learned that emotion was weakness, and weakness was death in boardrooms where men twice her age waited for any sign of softness to exploit. She wore a charcoal suit that had been tailored specifically for her frame, every line precise, every angle calculated. Dark hair pulled back in a style that looked effortless, but probably required professional assistance. 43 years old according to the company bio, though from behind she could have been 30 or 50, age erased by the armor of success. Nathan stood in the doorway, uncertain whether to announce himself or wait. The office occupied what had to be a quarter of the entire floor. 3 monitors sat dark on a desk the size of Sophie's bed. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with business texts and framed awards that meant nothing to anyone except the people who gave them and the woman who'd earned them. No personal photos, no artwork chosen for enjoyment rather than investment value. Nothing that suggested a human being actually spent 60 hours a week in this space. Victoria finished her call and turned. Her eyes swept over Nathan with the practiced assessment of someone who made billion-dollar decisions by reading balance sheets and body language. For a moment, something in her expression shifted, became fractionally less sharp, though Nathan couldn't identify what had changed or why. You're from IT. Not a question, a statement of categorization, filing him into the appropriate mental folder before moving on to more important matters. Yes, ma'am, Nathan Cole. I got the call about a system malfunction. It froze during a video conference 20 minutes ago. Won't restart properly. She gestured toward the desk. Nathan set his toolkit down carefully, hyper-aware of the neat document stacks arranged across the surface. The kind of organization that suggested someone who controlled chaos through relentless discipline. He powered down the system completely, checking connections with practiced efficiency. Victoria didn't leave. She moved to the windows, arms crossed, watching him work with the same focused intensity she'd probably used in 1,000 negotiations. The silence stretched. Nathan had learned to work while being observed, to ignore the hovering presence of people who needed to understand how their machines worked, but couldn't quite grasp that the solution was almost always simpler than they feared. But Victoria's observation felt different. She wasn't watching to understand. She was watching to measure, to calculate, to determine something Nathan couldn't identify. He initiated a hard restart. The monitors flickered to life one by one. Startup sequence loaded. Error messages scrolled past. He watched for warning signs, anything that might indicate deeper problems. The main screen loaded her desktop. Clean, organized, folders labeled with project codes and fiscal quarters. Nothing personal except the background image starting to materialize. Nathan's hand froze over the keyboard. It wasn't supposed to be visible. Normally, the system would load straight to the login screen, security protocols preventing unauthorized access. But something in the crash had disrupted the sequence, and now the background image filled the center monitor in full resolution. Victoria Hayes stood by a lake. Not the Victoria in this office, encased in designer armor and corporate composure. This Victoria wore jeans and a white shirt, standing on a wooden dock with water stretching behind her into tree-lined distance. No makeup that Nathan could detect. Hair loose around her shoulders, moving slightly in whatever breeze had been blowing that day. She was smiling, not the controlled expression from company photos or press releases, but something genuine and unguarded, the kind of smile that came from being somewhere she actually wanted to be, doing something she'd chosen rather than scheduled. The sunlight caught her face in a way that made her look younger. Not younger in years, but younger in the way people look when they remember what joy feels like without having to manufacture it for quarterly earnings calls. Nathan reached for the keyboard to close it, to get to the login screen as quickly as possible, and pretend he hadn't seen this glimpse into a life that wasn't his business. "Stop!" Victoria's voice cut through the quiet. Nathan's hand stopped halfway to the keyboard. He looked up and found her standing much closer than before, close enough that he could see the exact moment her expression changed from neutral observation to something harder to read. She stared at the screen, at her own image reflected there. You saw it, not a question, an acknowledgement of something that couldn't be unseen. Nathan wanted to lie. Every instinct told him to lie, to protect himself, to maintain the professional distance that existed between billionaire CEOs and IT technicians who fix computers. But something in her tone, something in the way she looked at the photograph like she'd forgotten it existed, made him tell the truth. "Yes, I'm sorry. The system loaded incorrectly. I wasn't trying to." "I know you weren't trying." Victoria moved closer to the desk, her eyes still fixed on the image. Nathan could smell her perfume now, something subtle and expensive that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "That was taken 3 years ago. I forgot I'd set it as the background." Nathan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Victoria looked at him directly then, and he saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected. Not anger, not embarrassment, something closer to curiosity mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify. "What did you think?" Nathan's mind scrambled for safe ground. "I'm sorry?" "Of the photograph. What did you think when you saw it?" This wasn't how interactions with executives went. They didn't ask IT technicians for opinions on personal photographs. They barely acknowledged IT technicians existed unless something was broken, and even then the acknowledgement came grudgingly, as if the need for technical support represented a personal failure. "I don't think my opinion matters, Miss Hayes." Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same intensity she'd used when he first walked in, but focused differently now, searching for something specific. "Everyone has opinions. They just don't usually weigh them out loud." Nathan looked at the photograph again, at the version of Victoria Carter who smiled like she meant it, who stood by a lake in casual clothes without an entourage or an audience, or a schedule dictating when she was allowed to feel something real. "It's a good photograph. You look happy in it." "Happy?" Victoria repeated the word like she was testing its weight, checking whether it still meant what she thought it meant. "Is that all?" There was something in her tone that felt like a challenge or maybe a test. Liam had the distinct feeling that his next words mattered more than they should, though he couldn't understand why. He could play it safe, give her the answer she probably heard from everyone else, tell her she looked professional, put together, successful. All the words that meant nothing because they cost nothing. Or he could tell her the truth. "You look real, like a person, not a position. That's what makes it a good photograph. Not your face or your clothes or anything else, just that you look like yourself." The silence that followed felt enormous. Nathan immediately regretted his honesty. He'd crossed a line, said something too personal, revealed too much of what he actually thought. He waited for her to tell him to leave, to send a complaint to his supervisor, to remind him that he was there to fix computers and nothing else. Instead, Victoria turned away from the screen and looked at him with an expression he couldn't read at all. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" The question landed like a physical object dropped into the room. Nathan stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a simple question." Victoria's voice was calm, clinical, almost like she was asking about quarterly projections. "In that photograph, do you think I'm beautiful?" Nathan's mind raced through possible responses. This had to be some kind of test or a trap. Executives didn't ask employees questions like this. It violated every unwritten rule about professional boundaries and power dynamics. But she was waiting for an answer. And something in her eyes told him she would know if he lied. Yes, you're beautiful in that photograph, but not because of anything to do with how you look. Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly. Explain that. The words came easier now that he'd committed to honesty. You look peaceful, like you're somewhere you actually want to be, doing something you chose to do. That's what makes it a good photograph. Not your face, or your clothes, or anything else. Just that you look like yourself. The silence stretched out again. Victoria stood very still, her expression unreadable. Nathan couldn't tell if he'd said exactly the right thing or exactly the wrong thing. Then something shifted in her face. The controlled mask she'd worn since he walked in cracked just slightly, revealing something underneath that looked almost like relief. No one has said that to me in a very long time, that I look like myself. Nathan didn't know how to respond to that, so he waited. Victoria walked back to the windows, putting distance between them. When she spoke again, her voice had returned to its usual controlled tone, but something in it sounded different, less certain. Finish the login sequence. I need to access those files before the meetings. Yes, ma'am. Nathan turned back to the computer, his hands moving through the familiar motions of pulling up the login screen. The photograph disappeared, replaced by the standard company login interface. He typed in the administrative override, reset her session, and waited for the system to fully load. When her desktop appeared, clean and organized and completely professional, he stepped back. Everything's running normally now. If you have any other issues, just call the help desk and they'll send someone up. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Nathan gathered his toolkit and headed for the door. He was almost in the hallway when her voice stopped him. Nathan, he turned back. She was still standing by the windows, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the glass, and for a moment she looked like a different version of herself. Someone caught between the person in the photograph and the CEO in the corner office. Thank you for being honest with me. Most people aren't. Nathan nodded, unsure what to say to that. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. The elevator ride back down to the third floor felt different than the ride up. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, though he couldn't identify exactly what. He kept replaying the conversation in his mind, analyzing every word, trying to understand what had actually happened in that office. By the time he got back to his desk, his phone was already buzzing with 3 new help tickets. Someone's printer was jammed. Someone else couldn't access their email. Normal problems, regular work. But Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the photograph by the lake, or the question Victoria Hayes had asked him, or the way she'd looked when he told her the truth. He spent the rest of the day moving between floors, fixing computers, resetting passwords, explaining for the 100th time that turning it off and on again actually did solve most problems. At 3:30, his phone buzzed with a reminder to pick up Sophie. He locked his workstation, grabbed his keys, and headed for the parking garage. The Honda started on the 3rd try, a familiar struggle that meant he needed to replace the battery soon, but probably wouldn't until it died completely and left him stranded somewhere inconvenient. Sophie climbed into the passenger seat with her purple backpack trailing behind her, already talking about the science project her class was starting next week. We get to pick partners, and Maya said she wants to work with me. So that's good because she's really smart and won't make me do all the work like Justin did last time. Nathan pulled away from the curb, half listening to Sophie's stream of consciousness recap of her day, while his mind kept drifting back to the 40th floor, to the photograph, to the question Victoria Hayes had asked him. Dad, are you listening? He focused on his daughter's face in the rearview mirror, on the way her eyebrows drew together in that expression of 8-year-old skepticism she'd perfected over the past year. Maya's your partner. That's great, sweetheart. Sophie gave him the look that said she knew when he was only pretending to pay attention. I said Maya might be moving to California. Her dad got a new job. Nathan's chest tightened. He knew what it meant for Sophie to lose her best friend, knew how hard she worked to let people in after losing her mother, knew that every loss reinforced the lesson that loving people meant risking the pain of losing them. That's hard, I'm sorry. It's okay. She hasn't moved yet and we can still video chat. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Sophie wanted the cereal with the cartoon character on the box. Nathan said no, then yes, when she pointed out it was actually cheaper than the healthy kind he usually bought. Small victories in the ongoing negotiation that was single parenthood. They got home to their apartment in Riverside, a two-bedroom in a building that had been nice in the 80s and was now just affordable. Sophie did her homework at the kitchen table while Nathan made dinner. Spaghetti. Again. He'd promised himself he'd learn to cook more variety, but spaghetti was easy and Sophie didn't complain, and some nights that was all he had energy for. After dinner, after homework, after the bedtime routine that had become their ritual for holding normalcy together, Nathan sat in his kitchen with his laptop open and coffee going cold beside him. He thought about the gap between who people appeared to be and who they actually were, about how Victoria Hayes probably went home to some penthouse apartment every night, surrounded by luxury and success, and felt completely alone, about how he'd spent 3 years making himself invisible, because visibility meant risk and risk meant potential loss, and he couldn't afford to lose anything else. His phone buzzed, a text from Tom. "Heard you got called to the executive floor today. What was that about?" Nathan typed back, "Computer crash, fixed it. No big deal." But it felt like a big deal. It felt like something had changed in that office. Something he couldn't name or explain, but could feel shifting beneath the surface of his carefully maintained invisibility. He closed the laptop and went to bed. The next morning started the same as every other morning. Nathan dropped Sophie at school, drove to Hayes Enterprises, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and settled in at his desk with a list of help tickets already waiting. Printer jams, password resets. Someone's computer was making a weird noise that would probably turn out to be a loose fan. At 9:45, his desk phone rang. "IT department, this is Nathan." The professional voice belonged to someone whose job was gatekeeping for people more important than him. "Mr. Cole, this is Rachel Henley from Executive Administration. Ms. Hayes would like to see you in her office at 10 o'clock. The words landed like cold water. Nathan sat up straighter in his chair, his mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. "Is there a technical issue?" "Ms. Hayes didn't specify. She just requested your presence at 10. The line went dead. Nathan stared at his phone for a long moment. Around him, the 3rd floor continued its normal rhythm. Keyboards clicking, quiet conversations, the hum of the air conditioning. He looked at the clock. 9:46. 14 minutes to figure out what he'd done wrong and how to fix it. Except he replayed yesterday's conversation in his mind for the 100th time, and he couldn't identify anything wrong. He'd been honest, maybe too honest, but she'd asked. She'd directly asked for his opinion, and he'd given it to her without any ulterior motive, without trying to flatter or manipulate or gain anything from it. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe his honesty had been interpreted as disrespect. Maybe he'd crossed a line by speaking to her like she was a person instead of a position. By the time 10 o'clock arrived, Nathan had convinced himself he was about to be fired. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer this time. He watched the numbers climb and tried to prepare himself for the conversation ahead. He'd worked at Hayes Enterprises for 3 years. It was a good job, stable, with benefits that covered Sophie's health care. He couldn't afford to lose it. But if he'd offended Victoria Hayes, if she wanted him gone, there was nothing he could do. People like him didn't fight people like her. They just packed their things and left quietly. The receptionist recognized him this time and waved him through without checking his badge. Nathan walked down the marble hallway, his reflection moving alongside him in the polished floor. Victoria's door was closed. He knocked twice. "Come in." He opened the door and found her standing at the windows again, looking out over the city. She wore navy today, another perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than his car. Her hair was pulled back in the same effortless style. "Close the door." Nathan closed it. The click of the latch sounded too loud in the quiet office. "Sit down." There were 2 chairs facing her desk. Nathan chose the one on the left and sat down, his hands resting on his knees. He waited. Victoria turned from the window and walked to her desk, but she didn't sit. She stood behind her chair, hands resting on the back of it, looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer it honestly." Nathan's pulse quickened. "Okay. Yesterday when you saw that photograph and I asked for your opinion, Why did you tell me the truth? Of all the questions he'd expected, that wasn't one of them. Nathan took a moment to consider his answer. Because you asked, and you seemed like you actually wanted to know. Most people, when asked a question by their CEO, tell her what they think she wants to hear. You didn't do that? No, ma'am. Why not? Nathan met her gaze directly. Because you can probably tell when people are lying to you. And because I figured if you asked the question, you already knew the answer you were supposed to get. Maybe you wanted to hear something different. Something flickered in Victoria's expression. She moved around the desk and sat down, the chair making a soft sound against the floor. Do you know why I started this company, Mr. Cole? The question threw him. No, ma'am. Because I wanted to build something that mattered, something real. She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured, resting on the desk surface. I was 24. I had an idea and no money, and everyone told me it was impossible. So I made it possible. 20 years later, I have everything I was supposed to want. Success, wealth, influence. I sit in rooms with people who control billions of dollars, and they listen when I talk. She looked up at him. And I can't remember the last time anyone spoke to me like I was a human being instead of a balance sheet. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't the controlled CEO from yesterday. This was something rawer, more vulnerable. Yesterday, you saw a photograph of me from 3 years ago. Do you know where it was taken? No, ma'am. A lake in Vermont. I rented a cabin for a week, completely alone. No phone calls, no meetings, no one needing me to make decisions or approve budgets or fix their problems. She looked toward the windows, though from where she sat, she couldn't see the view. It was the last time I felt like myself. Nathan wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words, so he stayed quiet and let her continue. When you told me I looked real, like a person and not a position, I realized you'd identified exactly what I'd lost, and I couldn't stop thinking about it all day. I kept replaying our conversation, analyzing it, trying to figure out if you had an angle, some ulterior motive for being honest with me. Victoria's gaze returned to him, sharp and focused. I don't. I fix computers. That's my angle. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, almost a smile. I know, I had my assistant pull your employment file. 3 years at Hayes Global, consistently good performance reviews. Single father, 1 daughter, 8 years old. You live in an apartment in Riverside, drive a Honda Accord, and have never asked for a promotion or a raise beyond the standard annual increase. The fact that she'd investigated him should have felt invasive, but somehow it didn't. It felt like confirmation that yesterday had affected her the same way it had affected him. You're invisible, and there's no cruelty in that observation, just fact. You do your job well, but nobody notices you. You move through this building like you don't exist. That's accurate. Why? Nathan considered how much truth to give her. Because I have a daughter who needs stability more than I need recognition. Because keeping my head down and doing good work means I keep my job and Sophie keeps her health care, and we keep our apartment. That's enough. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder. She set it on the desk between them. The company has a crisis. You saw the news? Nathan nodded. TechCrunch had published an expose yesterday afternoon. Hayes Enterprises, toxic culture exposed. Employee testimonials about favoritism, retaliation, feeling invisible. The same invisibility Nathan had perfected, except apparently not everyone was as comfortable with it. The board is demanding immediate action. I have 90 days to address it, or they'll reconsider leadership structure. Victoria leaned forward slightly. I'm forming a confidential investigation team. Very small, very focused. We're going to identify systemic problems and recommend solutions. I need people on this team who will tell me the truth, not what they think I want to hear. She paused. I'd like you to join the team. The words didn't make sense at first. Nathan replayed them in his mind, trying to understand what she was actually saying. I'm an IT technician. I don't know anything about employee wellness or company culture. No, but you know what it's like to be invisible in this building. You know what the regular employees experience every day because you're one of them. And you're honest. That's what I need more than expertise. Nathan's mind raced. This didn't make sense. CEOs didn't just randomly invite low-level employees onto special projects because of one honest conversation. Why me? There are hundreds of employees here. Thousands. Why would you pick someone you just met yesterday? Because yesterday you looked at me and saw a person. Everyone else in this building sees a position, a title, a source of approval or fear or opportunity. But you saw someone who looked peaceful in a photograph by a lake. That's the perspective I need. Nathan looked down at the folder. He thought about Sophie, about the stability of his current job, about the risk of stepping outside his invisible role. He also thought about Victoria's question from yesterday and the way she'd looked when he gave her an honest answer, like someone had finally told her something true. What would this involve? Meetings probably 2 or 3 times a week, mostly in the evenings. You'd keep your regular position, but this would be additional work. The team is small, just 5 people, including yourself. Confidential. We're trying to identify systemic problems in how this company treats its employees and find real solutions. Would there be additional compensation? 15% increase to your base salary immediately. Project completion bonus when we present findings to the board. 15%. That was significant. That was Sophie's college fund actually becoming real instead of theoretical. But money wasn't the only consideration. Nathan thought about what it would mean to step into visibility, to be associated with a project run directly by Victoria Hayes. It would change how people saw him, how they treated him. It would change everything. But this is probationary, 1-month trial. You'll work with the team, conduct employee interviews, provide your perspective. Any sign of ulterior motives, leaking to press, using this for personal gain, anything, and you're done. Not just from the project, from the company. The stakes crystallized. This wasn't just a promotion. This was a test with consequences that extended beyond the project itself. Can I think about it? Of course, Victoria pushed the folder across the desk toward him. Take this. Read through the project overview. If you're interested, let me know by the end of the week. Nathan picked up the folder. It was heavier than it looked. I'm not trying to pull you out of your comfortable invisible position as some kind of social experiment. I'm asking because I think you have something valuable to offer and because I need people around me who aren't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. Nathan stood up, the folder tucked under his arm. He should say something professional, something appropriate. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll give it serious consideration. Instead, the words that came out were different. You should go back to that lake sometime. The one in Vermont. You looked happy there. Like yourself. Maybe you need that more than another successful project. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. The folder under his arm felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Nathan's mind spun with possibilities and consequences, risks and opportunities. He'd expected to be fired. Instead, he'd been offered something he didn't know how to categorize. When he got back to his desk, he shoved the folder into his bag and tried to focus on the help tickets waiting for him. But his mind kept drifting to Victoria's office, to the conversation they'd had, to the way she'd looked at him when he told her to go back to the lake. That evening, after picking up Sophie from school, after homework and dinner and the bedtime routine, Nathan opened the folder. Inside was a detailed project overview. Timelines, goals, team structure, everything professional and organized and exactly what he'd expected. Except for a handwritten note on the first page in neat script. Thank you for seeing me. VH. Nathan read it 3 times. Then he closed the folder and sat in his kitchen, staring at nothing, wondering what he was going to tell her by the end of the week. Nathan spent 3 days reading the project overview after Sophie went to bed. The papers spread across the kitchen table like evidence of a crime he was considering committing. Each section outlined responsibilities that felt designed for someone else. Someone with credentials. Someone who understood organizational psychology and change management and all the business school terminology that decorated the margins in neat annotations Victoria had made herself. His phone buzzed Wednesday evening. Mrs. Patterson from across the hall. I'm making too much pot roast. Bring Sophie over for dinner tomorrow. The offer meant more than food. It meant help, The kind neighbors gave when they noticed a single father struggling to hold everything together. Nathan accepted, knowing tomorrow was the night he needed to make his decision. The project required an answer by Friday. Thursday after work, Sophie skipped across the hallway to Mrs. Patterson's apartment, excited about the old woman's stories about teaching kindergarten for 40 years. Nathan sat alone in his kitchen, the folder open to Victoria's handwritten note. "Thank you for seeing me." 6 words that shouldn't carry the weight they did. His phone showed a text from Sarah's mother, Sophie's grandmother, in Ohio. "Thinking about you both. Call when you can." He hadn't called in 3 weeks. Sarah's parents were good people who loved their granddaughter, but every conversation felt like walking through a museum of the life he'd lost. They talked about Sarah in present tense sometimes, correcting themselves mid-sentence when they remembered. Nathan understood. Some absences were too large to accommodate. The decision crystallized around 9 o'clock when Sophie came home smelling like pot roast and vanilla candles. "Mrs. Patterson says you're thinking about a big decision at work." Nathan looked up from the papers. "I didn't tell her anything confidential." "She said sometimes safe isn't the same as right." Sophie climbed into the chair across from him, her legs swinging above the floor. "Is it scary?" Nathan closed the folder. "A little. Mom used to say being scared means you're doing something important." The words landed like a punch. Sarah had said that, right before she quit her marketing job to follow Nathan when the Army transferred him to Fort Hood, right before the diagnosis that would make all their plans irrelevant. "You're right, she did say that." Sophie's expression turned serious, the look of a child forced to grow up too fast by circumstances beyond anyone's control. "I think you should do the scary thing, Dad. We'll be okay." Nathan made the call Friday morning before his courage could evaporate. Rachel Henley's voice was crisp. "Executive Administration. This is Nathan Cole. I need to speak with Ms. Hayes about the project proposal." The hold music was classical, something with violins. Nathan waited, his free hand drumming against his desk. "Mr. Cole," Victoria's voice came through clear. "Have you made a decision?" "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to accept the position on the team." A brief silence followed. "I'm glad. The first meeting is Monday evening at 6. Can you arrange childcare?" Nathan thought about Mrs. Patterson's offer to help more. "I can make it work." "Good. Rachel will send you the details." "And Mr. Cole?" "Yes." "Thank you for taking the risk." The call ended before he could respond. Nathan sat at his desk, staring at his phone, wondering what exactly he'd just agreed to. Around him, the third floor hummed with Friday energy. Someone was planning weekend plans. Someone else complained about the coffee machine running out again. Monday arrived faster than Nathan expected. He dropped Sophie at Mrs. Patterson's apartment at 5:30 with her homework and a promise to be back by 8. The older woman waved him off with a knowing smile. "Big meeting?" "Something like that." "Sophie will be fine. You go do whatever important thing you need to do." The elevator to the 40th floor felt different at 5:45. Most of the building had emptied, leaving behind the hollow quiet of after-hours corporate space. The lights were dimmer, activated by motion sensors as Nathan walked down the marble hallway. Through the windows, the city was transitioning from day to evening, office towers glowing against the darkening sky. He found the conference room at the end of the hall. Through the glass walls, he could see 3 people already seated around the table. Nathan recognized one of them from the legal department, though they'd never actually spoken. The other 2 were strangers. Nathan pushed open the door. All 3 looked up. The man from legal stood and extended his hand. He was mid-40s with salt and pepper hair in the confident posture of someone who'd won arguments in courtrooms. "You must be Nathan Cole, Marcus Webb, General Counsel." They shook hands. Marcus gestured to the others. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim from Human Resources and David Reynolds from Operations." Nathan shook hands with both, noting the curiosity in their expressions. They were probably wondering the same thing he'd wondered when Victoria first made the offer. Why was an IT technician on this team? "Take a seat. Ms. Hayes should be here shortly." Nathan sat down, acutely aware of the difference between his department store button-down and the designer labels everyone else wore. Sarah was reviewing something on her tablet, her expression focused and analytical. David made notes in a leather-bound notebook that looked expensive, his movements precise and controlled. The door opened and a 4th person entered. Marcus Chen, Senior Vice President of Operations. Nathan recognized him from company all-hands meetings where Chen presented operational metrics in a tone that suggested employees should be grateful for the privilege of hearing them. Chen was 52, wearing a suit that cost more than Nathan's monthly rent, and his expression when he saw Nathan sitting at the table mixed skepticism with something darker. "I didn't realize it was invited to strategic discussions." The comment hung in the air. Before Nathan could respond, Victoria walked in. Everyone stood automatically. She waved them back down with an efficient gesture and took her seat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for agreeing to be part of this project." Her voice carried the same controlled authority Nathan had heard during that first phone call about Tokyo office projections. "This team was selected because each of you brings a perspective I need. Marcus Webb, you understand the legal frameworks we're operating within. Sarah, you have a direct insight into employee concerns and complaints through HR. David, you know the operational realities of implementing change at scale." She turned to look directly at Nathan. "And Mr. Cole is here because he understands what it's like to be invisible in this company." The bluntness made everyone turn to look at him. Nathan felt heat rising in his face but kept his expression neutral. Marcus Chen's jaw tightened. "The goal of this project is simple. I want to identify why talented people leave this company, why morale is declining despite competitive salaries, and what we can do to fix it. But I don't want surface-level solutions. I want to understand the real problems." Victoria opened a folder in front of her. "Over the next 3 months, we'll be conducting confidential interviews with employees at every level, gathering data, analyzing patterns. Then we'll develop actionable recommendations for structural changes." She looked around the table. "This is confidential work. Nothing discussed in this room leaves this room. Understood?" Everyone nodded. The meeting lasted 2 hours. They discussed methodology, timelines, interview protocols. Nathan mostly listened, occasionally taking notes, trying to absorb the scope of what they were attempting. Sarah shared exit interview data that painted a disturbing picture. 67% cited lack of recognition. 54% said management didn't listen. 43% reported feeling invisible. David mentioned operational bottlenecks frustrating mid-level managers. Marcus Webb outlined potential legal considerations around employment practices. Marcus Chen sat with his arms crossed, contributing only when directly asked, and even then with responses that felt designed to minimize rather than illuminate. When Victoria asked for Nathan's input on how to approach employee interviews, he almost deflected, almost said he didn't have anything to add. But then he remembered why she'd asked him to be here. "Most of the people I work with don't think anyone at this level cares what they think. They assume complaints go into a black hole, so they stop complaining and just accept things the way they are." The room went quiet. Sarah looked uncomfortable. David frowned. Marcus Chen leaned forward. "That's a rather cynical assessment." Nathan met his gaze. 6 months ago, a security guard on night shifts submitted a suggestion about parking garage lighting. Too dim in certain sections, safety issue especially in winter when people leave after dark. The suggestion went to facilities management. Nothing happened. No response. No explanation. Now when people ask him if they should bother making suggestions, he tells them not to waste their time. That's a facilities issue, not what we're addressing here. Victoria's voice cut through sharp as broken glass. That dismissiveness is exactly the problem, Marcus. We'll investigate it. After the meeting, Nathan found an envelope on his desk when he returned to gather his things. Inside was a single piece of paper. The words were printed, not handwritten, probably from one of the communal printers anyone could access. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Nathan looked around the empty third floor. The lights were motion activated, creating pools of illumination around occupied desks and leaving the rest in shadow. He folded the note, put it in his pocket, and left. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a pattern of morning help, desk work, and evening interviews. Nathan talked to employees across departments, people who worked in accounting and marketing and customer service, people who'd been at Hayes Enterprises for 20 years, and people who'd been there 6 months. Each conversation revealed fractures in the foundation Victoria had built. Maria Rodriguez cleaned offices on the night shift. 22 years at Hayes Enterprises, invisible to everyone except the security guards who nodded hello when she arrived at 9 p.m. You want to know how I feel valued? She sat across from Nathan in an empty conference room, her cleaning cart parked outside the door. I've cleaned every floor in this building. I know which executives throw away full lunches while complaining about cafeteria quality. I know who works late and who just pretends to, but none of them know me. Mr. Chen walked right into me last month while on his phone. Didn't apologize, didn't even look at me. David Park was a mid-level manager in product development, 38, sharp, ambitious in a way that was slowly dying under layers of frustration. I proposed a process improvement that would save $200,000 annually, submitted it to operations. Never heard back. 6 months later, Marcus Chen announces the same idea in an all-hands meeting, takes full credit. I reported it to HR. What happened? David's laugh was bitter. Nothing. HR said they couldn't verify my claim without documentation. But I didn't keep documentation because I thought submitting through official channels meant it would be handled officially. Jessica Martinez was a young mother in finance, 32, competent, running on 4 hours of sleep because her daughter had ear infections that required midnight ER visits. Childcare emergency in March. Had to leave early for the first time in 6 years. Marcus Chen called it lack of commitment during my performance review. Passed me over for promotion. Gave it to a guy with half my experience who plays golf with him on Saturdays. Nathan compiled the interviews into reports, removing names but keeping details intact. The patterns emerged clear and damning. Favoritism based on personal relationships rather than merit. Retaliation disguised as performance management. A culture where speaking up meant becoming a target. At the third team meeting, Nathan presented his findings. Sarah had prepared statistical analysis showing turnover rates by department. David had outlined operational inefficiencies. Marcus Webb discussed legal exposure. Marcus Chen sat with his arms still crossed, his expression suggesting this was all beneath his attention. Nathan clicked through slides showing anonymized employee quotes. The room grew quieter with each revelation. Your methodology is flawed. These are cherry-picked examples. Marcus Chen's voice carried accusation wrapped in professional courtesy. I interviewed 43 employees across 7 departments. The patterns are consistent. Anecdotal evidence isn't data. Marcus Webb cleared his throat. Actually, qualitative research has validity when patterns emerge across multiple independent sources. Sarah nodded slowly. The exit interview data supports what Nathan found, but we should expand the sample size. Victoria looked directly at Nathan. Are you confident in what these people told you? Yes, they trust me because I'm one of them. They won't talk to executives. Victoria turned to the rest of the table. Then we continue. Nathan's access to employee perspectives is exactly why he's here. Marcus Chen's look carried pure hostility. After the meeting, walking to the elevator, Nathan felt the weight of that gaze following him. The sabotage started subtle. Week 5, Nathan's access badge mysteriously deactivated during a security review that affected only his badge. 6 hours to reactivate, missing 2 scheduled interviews. Interview subjects suddenly became unavailable. Meetings canceled without notification. Nathan would arrive to conference rooms to find employees apologetic but confused. I didn't get any cancellation notice. Neither had Nathan, but someone had sent emails from accounts that looked official enough to fool people who were nervous about participating in the first place. Tom caught him by the coffee machine Friday afternoon. Dude, people are talking. You're making enemies. Nathan poured coffee he didn't want. What people? Operations sent a memo to all department heads. Wellness project may require staff time. Minimize cooperation. The coffee tasted like burned plastic. When? Yesterday, Marcus Chen's signature. Nathan brought it to Victoria. She listened, her expression hardening with each detail. I'll look into it. 2 days later, she called Nathan to her office. Evidence spread across her desk. Marcus Chen's memo. Emails reassigning 3 employees who'd spoken to Nathan to different locations. Calendar invitations canceled from accounts that had been compromised. I confronted him, privately. Victoria's voice was controlled, but Nathan heard the anger underneath. He said the project threatens his department, that I'm looking for problems, I'll create them myself. What did you say? I told him to fix whatever he's hiding, or I will. He said the board won't back me, that half of them think I'm having a midlife crisis. The implications settled between them like smoke. This wasn't just about employee culture. This was about power and who controlled it. That evening, Nathan came home to find Sophie doing homework alone at the kitchen table. 7:30 instead of 6. Mrs. Patterson had helped with dinner, left a note saying Sophie ate the casserole she'd brought over. Sophie didn't look up from her math worksheet. "You're late again." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." "Mrs. Patterson said you were working on something important." Nathan sat down across from her. "I am." Sophie put down her pencil. "Dad, you're different." The words echoed what Mrs. Patterson had implied, what Tom had suggested, what Nathan felt every time he looked in the mirror lately. "Different how?" "You're always tired. You don't laugh anymore. You're always thinking about work." Guilt pressed down like physical weight. "I'm sorry. This project is just—" "Are we okay?" Sophie's voice cracked. "Are you going to lose your job?" Nathan reached across the table, taking her small hand in his. "What? No. Why would you think that?" Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. "Because you're changing. And when things change, bad things happen. Like with Mom." The connection gutted him. When Sarah got sick, everything changed. Schedules, routines, the fundamental architecture of their lives. Then Sarah died, and change meant loss, meant fear that any deviation from careful stability would shatter what remained. "Nothing bad is going to happen. I promise to protect our stability." Even as Nathan said it, he wondered if it was true. Could he keep that promise while pursuing this project? Could he maintain the invisible safety he'd built while stepping into visibility? Mrs. Patterson knocked softly, entering with her spare key. "I heard voices. Just wanted to check if you both are okay." Sophie wiped her eyes quickly. "We're fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for dinner." The older woman looked at Nathan with an expression that said she understood more than she'd been told. "Nathan, I can help more. Pick her up from school on project nights. Make dinner. You need support." Pride warred with need. Nathan had spent 4 years proving he could handle single parenthood alone, that he didn't require help, that he was enough for Sophie despite everything they'd lost. "I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask, I'm offering. That child needs consistency, and you need someone in your corner." Nathan accepted because Sophie's well-being mattered more than his pride. The 6-team meeting ran late, 9 o'clock, everyone exhausted, reviewing data that painted an increasingly damning picture of operations under Marcus Chen's leadership. When the others finally left, Nathan stayed behind to pack his notes. Victoria remained at the table, her posture showing the first signs of fatigue he'd seen. "Stay a moment." Nathan stopped gathering his papers. "Is something wrong?" "You look exhausted." The observation was simple, but it hit differently coming from her. "My daughter asked if I'm going to lose my job. She's 8. She shouldn't worry about that." Victoria's expression shifted. "But she does. When her mother died, everything in her world changed. Now I'm changing, and she's terrified. I understand that fear." Victoria stood, walking to the windows that had become her anchor point in difficult conversations. "I lost both parents when I was 23. Car accident on I-95, black ice, wrong place, wrong time. I was just starting this company. Everyone said I should grieve, take time. I worked instead. 18-hour days, 7 days a week for 2 years. Did it help? I built this." She gestured at the office, the building, the empire visible through the glass. "But I can't remember the last time I felt anything real. That photo you saw by the lake, that was 3 years ago. That was the last time I felt like myself instead of this." Nathan didn't know what to say, so he let the silence hold space for honesty. "Is it worth it? All this success, but being alone?" Victoria turned to face him. "I don't know anymore. I have everything I'm supposed to want. But that version of me in the photograph, she knew how to be happy. I forgot. Why did you really take this project? You could have stayed invisible, stayed safe." "Oh." Nathan considered lying, keeping the professional distance intact. "Because you asked, and because I'm tired of being invisible." Victoria's gaze held his. "I see you. I see you too, not the CEO, the person." Something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of connection that went beyond professional collaboration. Victoria looked away first. I'm going to Vermont next month, to that lake. I need to remember who I was before all this consumed me. Nathan heard the words she wasn't saying, the invitation hovering in the space between them. You should. Everyone needs that. Victoria started to say something, stopped, started again. Would you? She shook her head. Never mind. It's inappropriate. What? Nothing. It's late. You should get home to Sophie. Nathan left feeling like they'd had a conversation in two languages simultaneously. One professional, appropriate, safe. The other something else entirely. Week 7 brought James Rothman. Victoria called Nathan's desk directly Tuesday morning, her voice tight with controlled tension. Emergency meeting, my office, now. He found her standing at her desk, staring at security monitor footage on one of her screens. A man in his mid-40s, expensively dressed, confident in the way people are when they're used to getting what they want. Who is that? James Rothman, my ex-fiancé. Nathan looked at the screen more carefully. The man was meeting with Gerald Foster, chairman of the board in the building's executive lounge. He's meeting with board members? Victoria's jaw was tight. James was my business partner 8 years ago. We were engaged, planning to marry, planning a merger with a Japanese tech firm that would have doubled our market reach. I discovered he was manipulating the deal, steering contracts to shell companies he owned, positioning himself to profit millions while the company took on all the risk. What did you do? Called off the wedding, forced him out of the company. He's been trying to get back in ever since through stock purchases, through relationships with board members, through any angle he can find. Nathan processed the implications. If he's meeting with the chairman now, he's making a move, and the timing isn't coincidental. Victoria pulled up financial records. James had been quietly buying Hayes Enterprises stock for 6 months. Not enough to trigger disclosure requirements, but spread across enough entities to accumulate significant holdings, 18% through various investment vehicles. He's been talking to board members privately, positioning himself as concerned investor. His pitch is that I'm emotionally unstable, making erratic decisions. The wellness project. Exactly, he's using it as evidence, calling it a vanity project, a waste of resource, proof I'm not thinking clearly. Nathan felt the stakes multiply. What's his end game? Co-CEO position, or force a board vote of no confidence. He has the relationships, the stock, the narrative. All he needs is for this project to fail. Victoria sat down, and for the first time since Nathan had known her, she looked uncertain. I need this project to succeed. It's my proof I'm making the right decisions, not emotional ones. But if we fail, then James gets what he wants. The pressure had just intensified beyond employee wellness into something that could determine control of the entire company. Nathan spent week 8 digging through data with new urgency. He reviewed employee turnover statistics by department. Marcus Chen's operations division stood out like a wound. 62% turnover compared to company average of 28%. Highest complaint rate to HR. Most exit interviews citing hostile management. He went deeper with Victoria's authorization, accessing expense reports and compensation data. The pattern was clear and damning. Marcus had approved $150,000 in bonuses for his direct reports. All men, all white, all part of his golf foursome. Meanwhile, he'd denied merit raises for 23 diverse employees in the same department who'd exceeded performance targets. Most damaging was an email thread from 2 years ago, a consultant's report recommending culture improvement in operations. Marcus's response buried in the thread. Employees need to toughen up. No action needed. The report had never reached Victoria. Marcus had buried it. Nathan brought the evidence to her office late Thursday evening. This is enough to force him out. Victoria reviewed the documents, her expression hardening with each page. But if we move now, he'll run to James, claim retaliation, vindictive targeting. It plays into James's narrative about my judgment. So we wait until the final presentation. We expose everything at once, with full context in front of the entire board. But that means Marcus will keep sabotaging us for 3 more weeks. The danger increased daily. Week 9, Marcus went nuclear. Nathan got called to HR Friday morning. The message was formal, mandatory meeting regarding workplace conduct complaint. His stomach dropped. Sarah Kim from the team was there, professional distance replacing the collaborative relationship they developed. And Marcus Chen looking satisfied in a way that made Nathan's hands clench. The HR director, not Sarah, conducted the interview. Mr. Cole, a complaint has been filed alleging inappropriate relationship with Ms. Hayes. The words hit like ice water. That's not true. The complaint cites late-night meetings, private conversations others weren't party to, observable favoritism. Nathan kept his voice steady despite rage building underneath. Ms. Hayes is my supervisor on this project. We discuss sensitive information. That's not inappropriate, that's confidential. There are photographs of you and Ms. Hayes in private conversation, extended discussions after team meetings when others had left. Marcus Chen's voice was smooth. I have to protect this company's integrity. The appearance of impropriety is as damaging as actual impropriety. Nathan looked at Marcus Chen and understood. This was retaliation for the evidence they'd gathered. This was chess, and Marcus was sacrificing Nathan to protect himself. Victoria was questioned separately. Nathan waited in a conference room, walls closing in, career potentially ending because he dared to step out of invisibility. An hour later, the HR director returned. Our recommendation is suspension pending full investigation. Nathan's world tilted. I haven't done anything wrong. Nevertheless, we must investigate thoroughly to protect all parties. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her expression contained fury. Absolutely not. This is clear retaliation from Marcus Chen. Mr. Cole discovered evidence of discrimination and misconduct in operations, and now Marcus is manufacturing complaints to discredit him. The HR director shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Hayes, if you overrule our recommendation, it appears to confirm the inappropriate relationship. The trap closed perfectly. Protect Nathan and look guilty. Don't protect him and let Marcus win. Victoria's jaw tightened. I'm not suspending Mr. Cole, but effective immediately, all project meetings will include the full team only. No private conversations. All communication will be documented. Mr. Cole will report to Dr. Kim rather than directly to me. We'll eliminate any appearance of impropriety. The HR director nodded slowly. That's acceptable, but we'll be monitoring closely. After the meeting, Victoria pulled Nathan into an empty conference room. I'm sorry. Nathan's anger wasn't directed at her. You did what you had to. This means we can't. She trailed off, and Nathan understood what she wasn't saying. The conversations they'd been having, the connection developing between them, the moments of honesty that had made this project more than just work. Can't talk, really talk, like we have been. Victoria's voice was quiet. I know. Nathan felt the loss more acutely than he'd expected. I'll miss those conversations. So will I. They stood in the empty conference room, professional distance reasserting itself, the cost of continuing this fight suddenly personal in ways neither had anticipated. That evening, Nathan sat in his apartment trying to explain to Sophie why he'd be working even later for the next few weeks, why Mrs. Patterson would be picking her up from school more often, why everything felt precarious despite his promises of stability. Sophie listened with that too serious expression she got when processing adult problems she shouldn't have to process. Dad, do you love her? Victoria? The question came from nowhere and everywhere. Sophie, that's not, it's okay if you do. Nathan stared at his daughter, this 8-year-old who'd already learned more about loss than most adults. What makes you think? The way you talk about her, the way you look when you mention her name, like you used to look at Mom's picture when you thought I wasn't watching. Sophie's hand found his. Mom would want you to be happy. It's okay to love someone new. The permission broke something in Nathan's chest. He pulled Sophie into a hug, this child who was braver than he'd ever been, who understood that healing meant risking pain again. I don't know what I feel, but I know she needs help, and I can't abandon her. Sophie pulled back, her eyes serious. Then stay. We'll be okay. Nathan's decision solidified. He was staying. Whatever Marcus threw at them, whatever James Rothman planned, whatever the board decided, Nathan wasn't running. The next 2 weeks blurred together in preparation for the final presentation. 15 days to save Victoria's company, Nathan's career, and something between them, that neither could name, but both felt slipping away under the weight of professional scrutiny. The final 2 weeks felt like preparing for war. Nathan worked with 12 employees who'd volunteered to speak at the board presentation, coaching them in empty conference rooms during lunch breaks and after hours. Maria Rodriguez, the janitor who'd been invisible for 22 years, sat across from him Tuesday evening, practicing her statement for the 5th time. "I get nervous speaking in front of important people." Nathan leaned forward. "They're just people, Maria. Tell your story exactly like you told me. What if they don't believe me? They'll believe you. Your experience is your truth." David Park from product development struggled with different demons. His anger at being plagiarized by Marcus Chen had calcified into bitterness that would undermine his credibility if he couldn't control it during the presentation. What if Marcus interrupts me, calls me a liar in front of everyone? Nathan had thought about this. Then you stay calm. You have documentation. He has excuses. Let the evidence speak. Jessica Martinez, the young mother, passed over for promotion, worried about retaliation. What happens after? If this fails, Marcus will still be my boss. If this fails, we all have problems. But if we don't try, nothing changes. Victoria prepared data presentations working 16-hour days. Nathan knew this only because Sarah mentioned it during a team coordination meeting, careful to maintain the professional distance Marcus Chen's complaint had forced between them. The new structure meant Nathan reported to Sarah, who reported to Victoria. Communication flowed through channels, documented, sanitized of anything that might suggest impropriety. Nathan missed the conversations they'd had in her office late at night when everyone else had gone home. Missed the way Victoria's mask would slip when she talked about Vermont, about the version of herself she'd lost, about what it meant to be seen rather than just successful. Now they interacted in conference rooms with witnesses, discussing timelines and data points and implementation strategies. Professional, safe, empty. Sophie noticed the change in him Thursday evening when he came home at 8 instead of 7:30. "You're sad again." Nathan was heating up leftover pizza Mrs. Patterson had brought over. "Just tired, sweetheart." Sophie set down her colored pencils, abandoning the drawing as she'd been working on. "Dad, do you miss talking to her?" Nathan turned from the microwave. "Who?" "Victoria, the lady from work." The directness caught him off guard. Sophie had inherited Sarah's ability to see through deflection, to identify the emotional truth hiding behind convenient explanations. "We still talk about work, but not really talk, not the way you want to." Nathan sat down across from her, the pizza forgotten. "How do you know what I want?" Sophie's expression was serious beyond her 8 years. "Because I know what lonely looks like. I've been watching you be lonely since Mom died. And then for a little while you weren't, now you are again." The observation landed with devastating accuracy. Nathan had been lonely, so lonely he'd stopped noticing it, stopped believing anything else was possible. Then Victoria had asked if he thought she was beautiful, and something had shifted. Not romantic, not at first, but the recognition of one isolated person seeing another. Now the isolation had returned, enforced by HR policies and Marcus Chen's machinations, and the possible position of caring about someone he couldn't afford to care about. "It's complicated." Sophie pushed her drawing across the table. It showed 3 stick figures by water. One tall with long hair, one medium height, one small. A family that didn't exist except in a child's imagination. "Dad, do you love her?" The question demanded honesty. "I don't know what I feel. We barely know each other. But you want to know her." Nathan looked at his daughter's drawing, at the hope sketched in crayon and innocence. "Yes, I want to know her." "Then you should tell her, after the big presentation." "It's not that simple, sweetheart." Sophie's voice carried certainty Nathan had lost somewhere along the way. "Mom would want you to be happy. She told me before she died. She said, 'Take care of your dad. Make sure he remembers how to be happy.' I'm trying, but you have to help." The permission broke through every defense Nathan had constructed. Sarah had known she was dying months before the end. She'd prepared Sophie, prepared him as much as anyone could prepare for losing the center of their universe. And apparently she'd given their daughter instructions Nathan had never heard. She said that? In the hospital, When you went to get coffee and she thought she had more time. Tears welled in Nathan's eyes. Sophie climbed into his lap, 8 years old but still small enough to fit in the space that would always be hers. It's okay to love someone new, Dad. We'll be okay. 5 days before the presentation, Business Insider published a story that detonated across social media like a tactical weapon. Hayes CEO's inappropriate relationship with low-level employee. The article included photos of Victoria's Mercedes parked outside Nathan's apartment building, taken the day her car broke down and he'd helped fix it. Quoted anonymous Hayes employees about favoritism and late-night meetings. Speculated about Nathan's rapid involvement in a strategic project despite lacking credentials. The stock dropped 2% before lunch. CNBC picked up the story. Bloomberg ran analysis about corporate governance failures. The hashtag trended on Twitter with predictable outrage about power dynamics and ethical lapses. Nathan's phone rang at 2 p.m. The number showed a 415 area code he didn't recognize. Nathan Cole? Yes. This is Richard Chen from TechCore Solutions. We've been following your situation. Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. What situation? The unfortunate media attention around your work at Hayes. We'd like to offer you a position that removes you from that unpleasantness. I'm not looking for a job. Senior Director of Employee Relations, $220,000 base salary plus equity, triple your current compensation. And it makes all this scandal go away. Clean break, fresh start. The offer hung in the air like oxygen to a drowning man. $220,000, Sophie's college fund fully funded, a better apartment, security that didn't depend on the outcome of a project that was currently destroying both his reputation and Victoria's. I need to think about it. Of course, but we'd need an answer quickly. The position won't stay open long. Nathan ended the call and stared at his computer screen. Around him, the third-floor IT department continued its normal operations. Tom glanced over with sympathetic eyes that said he'd seen the news, knew Nathan was in trouble, couldn't help. The board called an emergency meeting that afternoon. Nathan wasn't invited, but Sarah told him about it later. Gerald Foster, the chairman, had demanded Victoria explain the allegations. James Rothman had attended as a concerned investor, his presence alone a statement. This is exactly what I warned the board about. Erratic judgment, emotional decision-making. The wellness project was always about her feelings, not sound business strategy. Victoria had defended herself, defended Nathan, defended the project, but the damage was done. Board members who'd been neutral were now questioning everything. The final presentation, scheduled for Monday, had become a referendum not just on employee culture but on Victoria's fitness to lead. Nathan went home that evening carrying the weight of impossible choices. Stay and risk everything for a project that might fail. Or take the money, protect Sophie's future, escape the scandal that was only going to get worse. He found Sophie waiting with Mrs. Patterson, both of them watching the news on their tablet. The story had made local television. Hayes Enterprises CEO accused of improper relationship, footage of Victoria leaving the building, refusing to comment, a business ethics professor speculating about power dynamics and workplace harassment. Dad, Sophie's voice was small. They're saying mean things about you and Victoria. Nathan knelt beside her chair. People say things when they don't know the whole story. But we know the story. We know you didn't do anything wrong. Mrs. Patterson excused herself quietly, understanding this needed to be a private conversation. Nathan pulled Sophie close. I got a job offer today. Different company, a lot more money. We could move to a better apartment, better school district. Everything would be easier. Sophie pulled back to look at his face. But you'd have to leave Victoria. Yes. And the project that helps people like Maria. Nathan hadn't realized Sophie knew about Maria, but apparently his daughter listened more carefully than he thought. The project would probably fail without me. Sophie's expression turned thoughtful, processing adult dilemmas with a maturity that broke Nathan's heart. Is Victoria nice? Yes. Does she need help? Very much. Then we stay. Nathan wanted to explain that it wasn't that simple, that $220,000 changed their lives, that protecting Sophie meant taking the safe option. But Sophie's next words stopped him. You taught me that when someone needs help, we help them. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You said that's what Mom did. She helped people who needed it. Sarah had been a volunteer at the Children's Hospital even while dying herself, reading to kids going through what she was going through, giving them hope she wasn't sure she believed anymore. Sophie had watched and learned that helping others mattered more than protecting yourself. We'll be okay, Dad. We always are. Nathan made his decision. He was staying. The next morning, Nathan traced the leak. Who had access to details about late-night meetings? Who knew about Victoria's car breaking down outside his building? Who had opportunity and motive to feed information to Business Insider? The answer materialized through security logs and calendar access. Jennifer Hayes, Victoria's executive assistant for 5 years. Present at every meeting, knew every private conversation, had keys to every door. Nathan brought the evidence to Victoria, breaking the no private meeting rule because this couldn't wait. He found her in her office at 7 a.m., already working, the city barely awake through her windows. We need to talk. Victoria looked up, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept. We're not supposed to. Jennifer leaked the story. The words landed like a physical blow. Nathan spread phone records across her desk, dozens of calls to a number that traced to James Rothman's personal line, bank records showing a $50,000 deposit 3 weeks ago to Jennifer's account. She's been feeding him information about the project, about us, about everything. Victoria stared at the evidence, betrayal written across her face. She's been with me for 5 years. James promised her $500,000 total when he becomes co-CEO, plus a job as his executive assistant with double her current salary. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the phone records. Nathan had never seen her hands shake before. Get her in here. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes later, professional as always, carrying Victoria's morning coffee and the Wall Street Journal. She saw Nathan and her expression flickered with something that might have been guilt or might have been calculation. You wanted to see me? Victoria pushed the phone records across the desk. James Rothman's personal number. 47 calls over 3 months. Want to explain? Jennifer's composure cracked. She set down the coffee carefully, buying time. I don't know what you're talking about. Nathan placed the bank statement beside the phone records. $50,000. First installment on $500,000 total, plus your new job when James takes over. The evidence was undeniable. Jennifer's shoulders sagged. You don't understand what it's like. I've worked for you for 5 years, Victoria. 5 years of making your coffee and scheduling your meetings and managing your life. You've never asked about mine. Never asked about my daughter's graduation or my mother's cancer or my divorce. I was invisible to you. The words echoed what employees had said during interviews, what Maria had said about executives walking past like she didn't exist. Victoria's face went pale. I was just an assistant, useful, replaceable. James sees me, values me, promises me real career advancement, not just being your shadow. Nathan understood the bitter irony, Victoria's own blindness to employees, the very thing she was trying to fix, had created the betrayal that might destroy everything. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Jennifer stood, dignity intact despite the circumstances. You'll lose Monday. James has the board votes. Your project won't save you. She left without looking back. Victoria stood at her windows, staring at nothing. She was right. I didn't see her. I was as guilty as Marcus Chen. Nathan moved to stand beside her, careful not to touch, aware that cameras might be recording, that their every interaction was scrutinized. But you're trying to change. That's what matters. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. What if it's too late? 3 days before the presentation, Nathan realized they could use the scandal to their advantage. James thinks he's won by destroying your credibility. Victoria looked up from data she'd been reviewing obsessively. He has. The board will use this as proof I'm compromised. What if we use it as proof of the problem? Explain. Nathan leaned against her desk, maintaining professional distance despite wanting to offer comfort through touch. The fact that people believe I couldn't earn this position on merit, The assumption that you couldn't value my work without inappropriate motives. That's the culture problem. That's systemic bias and cynicism in action. Victoria's eyes sharpen, seeing the strategy. You want to address the scandal directly in the presentation. I want you to explain why you chose me, what you learned from employee perspective. Vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Show the board that real change requires uncomfortable honesty. That's incredibly risky. Nathan met her gaze. Everything about this is risky, but it's true, and truth is all we have left. They spent Saturday rehearsing in an empty conference room, just the two of them despite the rules, because this was too important to delegate. Victoria practiced opening statements that acknowledged the scandal, explained her selection criteria, demonstrated the learning she'd gained from employee feedback. I sound defensive. Nathan shook his head. You sound human. That's the point. Late that evening, with the city dark beyond the windows and the building empty except for security guards, they sat across from each other, reviewing notes one final time. If this fails tomorrow, I lose the company. James wins. And I'll be the employee who crashed a billionaire's empire. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Why did you stay? TechCore's offer was real. 220,000, security, escape from all this. You could have run. Nathan thought about Sophie's drawing, about Sarah's deathbed instructions, about what it meant to help people who needed it even when it was hard. Because someone needed to see you, the real you, not the CEO, not the position, but the person who smiled by a lake in Vermont and forgot what that felt like. Victoria's mask crumbled. Tears gathered in her eyes, though she fought them back with trained discipline. I'm terrified, not of losing the company, of being alone again. I've been alone for so long, and then you walked into my office and saw me, and I remembered what it felt like to be seen. If tomorrow fails and I lose everything, I lose this too, whatever this is between us. Nathan wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, tell her they'd figure it out together. But cameras might be watching, HR might be building their case. So he kept his hands on his notebook, and let his words carry what touch couldn't. This isn't just professional for me. It stopped it being just professional the moment you asked if I thought you were beautiful. Tell me this is real. Her voice carried desperate need. It's real, but we can't. Not until this is over. Not until it's clear and right and no one can use it against us. Victoria understood. Protection for both of them, for the project, for any possibility of a future that wasn't tainted by scandal and opportunism. After tomorrow. Win or lose, we figure this out. After tomorrow. Monday arrived like Judgment Day. The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main auditorium. 200 attendees. Full board, senior executives, 150 employees invited to witness. Media outside waiting for statements. Nathan arrived at 9 wearing his best suit, the one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral, and worn exactly 3 times since. The auditorium was already filling. Employees clustered in back rows, uncertain about being invited to something usually reserved for executives. Board members occupied front center, James Rothman among them, despite not being a board member. His presence a statement about who held real power. Marcus Chen sat with senior executives, his expression suggesting he'd already won, that this presentation was just formality before Victoria's inevitable fall. Nathan found his team backstage. Sarah was reviewing notes, Marcus Webb checking legal language one final time, David Reynolds looking nervous despite his operational expertise. The 12 employee volunteers waited in a separate room, Maria Rodriguez clutching her written statement like a lifeline. Victoria arrived at 9:40, composed, but Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful control that kept panic at bay. Everyone ready? Sarah nodded. Data presentation is loaded. Marcus Webb confirmed legal frameworks were prepared. David had implementation timelines ready. Nathan had coached the employees through their statements dozens of times. Then let's begin. The auditorium quieted as Victoria took the stage. Lights dimmed except for the presentation screen and the podium where she stood, alone facing judgment. Many of you read articles about me this week, about an alleged inappropriate relationship with an employee. The bluntness shocked the room into silence. Board members exchanged glances. James Rothman leaned forward. Employees in the back shifted uncomfortably. I'm going to tell you why I chose Nathan Cole for this project and what he taught me. Victoria's voice was steady, but Nathan heard the fear underneath. I chose him because he told me the truth. When I asked his opinion, he didn't tell me what he thought I wanted to hear. He told me what he actually thought. That's rare in this company, especially for someone in my position. I've surrounded myself with people who manage me, who calculate their words, who see me as a means to an end rather than a human being. She clicked to the first slide showing Nathan's employment record. Nathan Cole is an IT technician with 6 years military service and 3 years at Hayes Enterprises. Perfect attendance, consistent performance, never asked for advancement, single father raising an 8-year-old daughter. I chose him because he understands what it's like to be invisible in this company and because he's honest enough to tell me when I'm wrong. James Rothman stood up. This proves exactly what I've told the board. Emotional decision-making based on personal feelings rather than qualifications. Victoria didn't flinch. You're right that it was emotional. I was emotional when I realized we'd built a culture where honest feedback is so rare that receiving it feels revolutionary. Where talented people are invisible because they don't play politics. Where single parents like Nathan have to choose between career advancement and being home for their children because we've created systems that punish anyone with obligations outside work. She advanced to the next slide, Sarah's statistical analysis. Dr. Kim will now present the data we've gathered. Sarah took the podium, her presentation clinical and devastating. Turnover costs $47 million annually when accounting for recruitment, training, and lost productivity. Exit interviews revealed patterns consistent across departments. 67% cited lack of recognition. 54% said management didn't listen. 43% felt invisible. Department by department breakdown showed Marcus Chen's operations division as catastrophic outlier. 62% turnover. Highest complaint rate. Most damaging exit interviews. Marcus Chen interrupted from his seat. This is manipulated data designed to target me specifically. Sarah didn't pause. These are facts from HR systems you have access to verify. The patterns speak for themselves. Marcus Webb presented legal framework next, outlining recommendations for third-party HR oversight, anonymous feedback systems, employee councils with real authority, legal protections against retaliation, accountability structures that applied to all levels, including executives. David Reynolds covered implementation timelines and operational requirements, how changes would roll out, what resources were needed, how success would be measured. Then came the employees. Nathan took the podium to introduce them. You're going to hear from 12 employees representing different departments and perspectives. They volunteered knowing their participation might have consequences. I'm asking the board to listen not as executives hearing complaints, but as human beings hearing other human beings. Maria Rodriguez went first, her voice shaking but gaining strength as she spoke. I've worked here 22 years. I clean your offices every night. I know which executives throw away full lunches while complaining about cafeteria quality. I know who works late and who just pretends to. But none of you know me because I'm invisible. Mr. Chen walked into me last month while on his phone, didn't apologize, didn't even look at me like I wasn't there. David Park spoke about his process improvement idea stolen and credited to Marcus Chen, about reporting it to HR and receiving no response, about learning that honesty meant nothing when power protected itself. Jessica Martinez described childcare emergency and Marcus Chen's retaliation disguised as performance management, about being passed over for promotion given to less qualified man who played golf with her boss. Each employee spoke their truth without anger, without exaggeration, just lived experience that accumulated into undeniable pattern. By the 8th testimony, board members were taking notes. By the 10th, Gerald Foster looked disturbed. By the 12th, even Marcus Chen's allies seemed uncomfortable. When the employees finished, Nathan presented the evidence about Marcus Chen they'd been saving. Buried reports, bonus disparities, email trails showing deliberate suppression of complaints, 2 years of documented discrimination and retaliation. This isn't about one executive. Marcus Chen is a symptom of systemic problems, but his department illustrates what happens when culture fails. when power protects itself rather than serving the mission. Marcus Chen stood, face red with rage. This is character assassination. These are cherry-picked examples taken out of context. Victoria returned to the podium. Then let's provide context. You're suspended effective immediately pending investigation. The board will determine your future based on full review of evidence. Marcus stormed out. The room erupted in whispers. Gerald Foster called for order. James Rothman tried one last attack. This entire presentation proves my point. Poor judgment, emotional decision-making based on personal relationships rather than business sense. Victoria has compromised this company's integrity. An employee stood up in the back row. Security guard, older black man Nathan had interviewed early in the process. Mr. Rothman, I don't know you, but I know Ms. Hayes is listening for the first time in years. That matters more than whatever politics you're playing. Another employee stood. I was ready to quit. This project is why I'm staying. More employees stood, one by one, spontaneous show of support that wasn't scripted or planned. Victoria's voice cut through the room. This project costs $1.2 million to conduct. Recommended changes will cost $12 million to implement over 2 years. Return on investment is $35 million annually from reduced turnover plus productivity gains from improved morale. She advanced to her final slide. But real value isn't in numbers. It's in building a culture where every person matters, from janitors to executives, where talent is recognized regardless of who you know or how well you play politics, where honesty is valued instead of punished. She looked directly at the board. Every person matters, from janitor to CEO. When we forget that, we lose our humanity. We become machines optimizing profits at the cost of the people who generate those profits. I forgot that. This project reminded me. Gerald Foster cleared his throat. The board will vote on project recommendations and related leadership questions. We'll convene privately and announce decisions within the hour. The auditorium emptied slowly. Employees approached Nathan, thanking him, thanking the volunteers who'd spoken, thanking Victoria. Maria Rodriguez hugged him with tears in her eyes. Whatever happens, thank you for seeing us. Nathan waited with Victoria in her office while the board deliberated. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate to the moment. 53 minutes later, Gerald Foster called. The board has voted 8-2 to approve all project recommendations. Full implementation authorized with quarterly progress reviews. James Rothman's proposal for co-CEO structure is rejected. Marcus Chen's employment is terminated effective immediately with standard severance. And Victoria, the board expresses full confidence in your leadership. Victoria's hand trembled as she set down the phone. We won. Nathan felt relief and exhaustion crash over him simultaneously. You won. This was always your fight. No, we won this together. Media waited outside for statements. Victoria told them Hayes Enterprises was implementing comprehensive culture change, that employee voices mattered, that the company was committed to being as good to its people as its people were to the company. The stock recovered by market close. 1 week later felt like a different universe. Marcus Chen was gone. His replacement, promoted from within, was a woman with strong employee reviews and no golf handicap. New HR director started, external hire with independence from existing power structures. Anonymous feedback system launched. Employee council forming with Nathan coordinating. Victoria formally offered Nathan a promotion. Director of Employee Experience, $145,000 base salary, office on 15th floor, small team reporting to you. Nathan accepted, thinking about Sophie's college fund becoming real, about better apartment in the same neighborhood, about stability with growth instead of stability through stagnation. But Victoria had been distant since the presentation. Professional congratulations, formal communication through proper channels, none of the connection they'd built before HR complaints and media scandals forced them apart. Nathan wondered if that was all they'd been. Project colleagues who'd mistaken stress and shared purpose for something more. 10 days after the presentation, Victoria called him to her office. Nathan took the elevator up, remembering the first time he'd made this journey, nervous about fixing a computer, unaware his life was about to change completely. She stood at her windows as always, backlit by afternoon sun. I wanted to thank you officially for your contributions to the project. Just doing my job. Victoria turned to face him, and Nathan saw uncertainty in her expression. About that, I've been thinking about my role here, about what I want my life to look like. Nathan's chest tightened. Was she leaving? After everything, was she walking away? I built this company for 19 years, sacrificed everything for it. Family, friends, any semblance of personal vibe. But I realized something during this project. She moved closer. I don't want to sacrifice anymore. I'm bringing in a COO to handle daily operations. I'll remain CEO but focus on strategy and culture. I need to have a life outside these walls. That's good. You deserve that. I'm going to Vermont next week. To the lake. 4 days. Nathan remembered the photograph, remembered telling her she should go back. You should, you need that. Victoria's voice was quiet but steady. I'd like you and Sophie to come with me. The invitation hung between them, heavy with implications. As what? Boss and employee having professional retreat? As people who see each other, who want to keep seeing each other, who've been pretending for weeks that this is just professional, when we both know it stopped being professional the moment you told me I looked real. Nathan's heart raced. I need to know this is real, not gratitude, not relief that the crisis is over, not convenience or loneliness, looking for the nearest solution. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Nathan could see the hope and fear warring in her expression. It's real, Nathan. It's been real since you told me I look like a person instead of a position. I don't need you to save me. I need you to see me. And I think maybe you need someone to see you too. What about company policy, power dynamics? We just spent 3 months fighting accusations about inappropriate relationships. I don't care. I've spent 19 years caring what other people think, building this company while forgetting to build a life. I'm done choosing work over happiness. Nathan thought about Sophie's drawing, about Sarah's deathbed instructions to remember how to be happy, about the risk inherent in letting someone matter again. I need to talk to Sophie. This affects her too. Disappointment flickered across Victoria's face, but she understood. Of course, take the time you need. But Victoria, I want this. I want you. I just need to make sure Sophie's ready. Hope replaced disappointment. I'll wait. That evening, Nathan sat with Sophie, showing her Victoria's invitation. She wants us to go to Vermont with her, to a lake, for a few days. Sophie's eyes lit up. Like a vacation? Like meeting someone important, someone who might become part of our lives, if you're okay with that. Sophie studied his face. Do you love her? Nathan took a breath. I think I could, if we give it a chance. Does she make you happy? Yes. Sophie smiled, the first genuine smile Nathan had seen in weeks. Then we should go. Mom would want us to go. 2 weeks later, Nathan's Honda pulled up to a cabin in Vermont. Lake stretched beyond the trees, exactly like the photograph. Sophie bounced in the back seat, excited about swimming and hiking and this adventure that felt like stepping into a new version of their lives. Victoria waited on the porch wearing jeans and a white shirt, hair down, no makeup, looking exactly like the photograph except for the smile, which was bigger and more genuine. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the passenger seat, where she'd insisted on sitting despite Sophie's protests. Victoria had invited her too, understanding that Sophie needed familiar adults around when everything else was changing. You must be Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for coming. The older woman sized Victoria up with the discernment of someone who'd taught kindergarten for 40 years and knew how to read people. Thank you for inviting me and for making this one smile again. She nodded toward Nathan, who was pulling luggage from the trunk. The first day was awkward. Sophie watched Victoria carefully, testing her with questions and observations. Victoria was nervous around children, uncertain how to act, whether to be CEO professional or something else entirely. Nathan mediated, patient with both of them as they figured out new dynamics. Can you make pancakes? Sophie's challenge came at breakfast the second morning. I don't really cook. What do you do? Nathan started to intervene, but Victoria stopped him. That's a fair question. I work. A lot. But I want to learn other things, like making pancakes. Could you teach me? Sophie considered this. You have to follow instructions exactly. No improvising. I'm good at following instructions. They made pancakes together, Victoria following Sophie's directions with the same focus she brought to board presentations. The results were messy but edible. Sophie declared them acceptable. You can try again tomorrow. Practice makes perfect. By the third day, something shifted. Victoria stopped trying to impress and started just being present. She sat by the lake with Sophie collecting stones, listening to 8-year-old theories about what made some rocks prettier than others. She asked Nathan about his military service, really listened to stories about deployments and the friends he'd lost, and why he'd chosen ET as safer alternative. They took the photograph on the dock that afternoon, Mrs. Patterson operating Nathan's phone camera, capturing all three of them in the exact spot where Victoria had stood alone 3 years ago. Same dock, same sunlight, same lake. But this time Victoria stood between Nathan and Sophie, all three holding hands, all three smiling with the unself-conscious joy of people who'd found something they'd stopped believing existed. Sophie looked at the image afterward. We look like a family. Victoria knelt down to Sophie's eye level. Is that okay with you, if we try to be something like a family? Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing adult questions with her particular brand of serious consideration. Will you be nice to my dad? I'll try every day. Will you come to my science fair? I wouldn't miss it. Do you love him? Victoria glanced at Nathan, then back to Sophie. Yes, very much. Sophie threw her arms around Victoria's neck, the gesture spontaneous and trusting. Okay then, you can be part of our family, but you have to help with homework sometimes and come to my piano recitals and remember my birthday. Victoria hugged Sophie back, tears in her eyes. Deal. 6 months later, the changes were visible everywhere. Nathan worked from an actual office on the 15th floor, leading a team of 6 people focused on employee experience initiatives. Turnover had dropped 40%. Employee satisfaction scores were up 47%. Hayes Enterprises made Forbes' list of best companies to work for. But the real changes were smaller and more personal. Nathan and Sophie moved to a better apartment, still in Riverside, still the same school, just 3 bedrooms instead of 2. Sophie decorated the 3rd bedroom with drawings and books, claiming it as her space for when Victoria stayed over twice a week for dinners that became family ritual. Victoria left the office by 6 most days. She'd hired a COO who handled operations while she focused on strategy and culture. She had lunch with Nathan every Tuesday, not hiding but not performing either, just 2 people who worked together and cared about each other, navigating the complexity of both. They were building something slowly, carefully, without rushing toward definitions or commitments, testing whether what they'd found in crisis could survive normalcy. Victoria proposed the consulting division over dinner at their apartment, Sophie already in bed, Mrs. Patterson having gone home after sharing the meal. I want to teach other companies what we learned. Turn this into a consulting practice. You'd co-lead it with me. Nathan considered the implications. Equal partners? In everything that matters. Both professional and personal partnership built on respect and honesty and the willingness to see each other clearly. 1 year after that first elevator ride to the 40th floor, Nathan was fixing a computer on the 3rd floor. Still did it sometimes, staying connected to the reality of employee experience, remembering where he'd come from. A young IT technician watched him work. Aren't you a director now? Why are you fixing computers? Because it reminds me where I came from. And because everyone matters, not just executives. The moment I forget that is the moment I stop being useful. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Need you on 40. Important. Nathan took the elevator up, full circle from that first emergency call. Same nervous anticipation, but different meaning now. Victoria's office had changed. Photos on her desk now. The lake picture with all 3 of them. Sophie's artwork on the wall. Personal touches that suggested a human being worked here instead of a corporate machine. Computer problem? Victoria smiled, the expression easy and genuine. No, it's 5:30. We have dinner reservations, but I wanted to ask you something first. She showed him documents. The Vermont cabin deed with her name on it. I bought it. I want us to go there every quarter, all 3 of us, to remember who we are beyond the titles. Nathan pulled her close, finally able to touch without cameras watching or HR building cases. That's not really a question. Will you keep seeing me? Really seeing me, even when it's hard? Every single day. Will you keep seeing me? Always. They left together, hand in hand, walking through the 40th floor where this had all begun. Past the conference room where Nathan had first sat with the team. Past the windows where Victoria had stood so many times looking at a city she controlled but didn't feel connected to. The elevator descended, carrying them back to regular life. To picking up Sophie from Mrs. Patterson's where she'd gone after school. To dinner reservations at the Italian place Sophie loved. To homework and bedtime stories and all the normal things that made up the life they were building together. Some connections change everything. Some people are worth the risk of being seen. And sometimes the person who fixes your computer ends up fixing something far more important.